The world unfolds differently for each of us. Why? Where do the rules come from? Within each of us, there is a unique philosophy shaping our thoughts, beliefs, feelings, worldviews, and actions. This is Inner Dialogues with Ecem, an introspective space for curious souls and minds. This is where you get to understand your individual philosophy that writes the script of your life. This is where we unveil the inner wisdom that guides you. Yep, that was your inner sage knocking the door. Let's go and chat with him. Hi, it's Ecem. Welcome back to Inner Dialogues with me. In today's episode, I want to talk about consistency. A couple of months ago, we were talking with one of my best friends from university about my aspiration to create a community with this podcast and my coaching business, overall with this Inner Dialogues brand. And she reminded me of the years we spent in a tiny little dorm with 6 girls in total, and how my way of living was quite inspirational and distinct, so much so that at some point everyone was eating oats, practicing yoga, and chatting about yoga philosophy. She said, "You are consistent in the way you live, in the things you do, and in your practices in general. This consistency creates a strong character, one that can inspire others. Have you forgotten that you made everyone in that room eat oats and do yoga?" I haven't forgotten. Those years were really inspirational for me as well. But hearing those words from her was just, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. It made me see my potential in my aspiration to create a community with this podcast and Inner Dialogues brand. By the way, I want to say thank you to everyone who's listening to this podcast and who's reaching out to me saying that this or that episode really resonated with them. Thank you so much. It means the world to me, truly, because this was my dream with this podcast. I wanted to create a community where we support each other in our journeys, where we become inspirations to each other, where we remind ourselves that we are not alone and we don't have to feel alone. I wanted to create a space where we get to share our opinions, our truths, our individual ways of thinking, and overall our unique individual philosophies. So thank you for being here. I truly appreciate what we are creating here together. I think this is related to consistency, Sometimes I might sound like a broken record by saying we are here to understand our individual philosophy, or saying let's unfold this, let's unfold that. If nothing sounds like a broken record, I'm sure the intro does sound like one. But that is consistency. Hearing that intro every time does something to our brains and minds. It reminds us of the goal of this podcast, the thing we are creating here, the thing in which we are being consistent, aka talking to our inner sage. Remember, this is consistency. Consistency creates a momentum. It creates trust. It is accumulative, and therefore it takes time, but it does build trust and eventually community. Let me take you to our dorm during my university years where we had that community. I started practicing yoga on my senior year in high school, and when I entered uni, I was practicing it daily. I was living in a dorm with 5 other girls. It was a really, really small room with 3 bunk beds, a table, 2 chairs, and 6 cupboards. We lived together for 3 years. The first year was the best because we had a bigger room, but the last 2 years, the room was insanely tiny. but we made the most out of it. We even had a carpet in our room where I used to lay my yoga mat and do yoga in this tiny space between two bunk beds. And as I was doing yoga, my other two friends who were praying 5 times a day used to roll out their prayer rug on the corner of my yoga mat and pray. We were literally doing the poses in our own spiritual practices in a way that our butts were against each other. There was also a funny confusion that one of our friends experienced. In Islam, when you pray 5 times a day by performing these sets of poses on your prayer rug, it is forbidden to pass in front of the person who is praying. You should wait until their praying ends to pass in front of them. And in yoga practices, there is no such rule. And one of our dorm mates was basically so confused about whom she could pass in front of and whom not, that one day, while I was doing yoga, I saw her sitting on her bed. So I asked her, "What are you waiting for?" And she said, "I'm waiting for you to finish your practice." At that moment, she realized she could pass in front of me because I wasn't the one who prayed. I was just doing yoga. You know, in our minds, we attribute places with certain activities, like a bed with sleep, a table with a dinner and breakfast. If there's a space where we constantly do our meditation or yoga practices, we attribute that space to that activity. But in our tiny little dorm, all activities were happening in the same place. We used to sleep where we study. We used to study where we eat. We used to cook where we got dressed. We used to pray and do yoga where we iron or gather with our friends during the night. So rightfully, my friend attributed that tiny little space between the two bunk beds to praying, yoga, and any kind of spiritual practice. For 3 years, every weekday, I practiced yoga in that space, sometimes when the others were sleeping in the morning, sometimes when they all going to bed, but most of the time when they were chatting, when they were laughing, when they were studying in their beds, which was literally at half arm's length away. There was also a lot of respect in that room. Respect for the different personalities of each one of us. Respect for the differences in our worldviews. Respect for our own individual ways of living. Respect to our unique food preferences. It required a lot of respect and understanding to share that kind of tiny space with 6 people in total. Well, 6 people was only the case when we had to sleep at night, because other times we were way more than 6. We were curious enough to understand each other. We were flexible enough to make room for everyone in that room, for everyone's opinion, way of living, and understanding of the world. As an introvert, it was a challenge for me to be able to find my own space and alone time within this kind of a space where we had to share everything and where there was no chance to stay by ourselves. Now that some years have passed, I can see how I created a bubble for myself in my own way. I've always had the top bunk, and I think it was quite intentional in my subconscious. It was a bit more private and slightly off the beaten track, you know. I didn't give up on my yoga practice, and I think that was a huge contribution to the longevity of my bubble. Almost for the whole 3 years, I've eaten the same breakfast, yogurt with oats and fruits. Oh, and also my herbal tea. The consistency was keeping me sane. It was keeping my introverted side sane. It was creating this routine for me to hold on to and go back to recharge. These routines were my recharging stations as an introvert who had no personal space whatsoever in that tiny little dorm. In time, I realized that my bubble was contagious, or more so, the practices that I do to keep my bubble up and running were contagious. In time, everyone in that room, except for one of our friends who was officially living in that room but not really using it other than sleeping, and unofficially another friend of ours living more than her. Anyway, everyone in that room started to get curious about why this girl was eating the same breakfast every day, why this girl was practicing yoga early in the morning or late at night after a long day of classes and social life of university, why this girl was meditating before going to sleep. Side note here, I don't think that I was aware that all these consistent things that I did back then were creating a sanity bubble, so to say, for myself in that dorm. This is my interpretation of that Ecem and those years I spent now that some years have passed. A community was being formed around me. A community of yoga, mindfulness, healthy eating habits, meditation, philosophy, energy healing, etc. Now that I remember, the first tangible example of it was definitely them wanting to try the yogurt bowls that I used to prepare with homemade yogurt and different oats and fruits and seeds. At some point, they asked me to prepare it for them. And when I rarely changed my eating routine from oats with yogurt to porridge, what a huge change, right? They wanted to try that one as well. At some time, on everyone's shelves above the fridge, there was the same brand of oats because at that time, only that brand and maybe one or two existed. Another tangible example of this flourishing of a community was definitely they are wanting to try out yoga. In our first year of living together, after a couple of months, they asked me to guide them into a yoga practice. One day, we went to the gym of our dormitory and I guided. I think we were 4 or 5 in total, and one of them wasn't even our dorm mate. She was, I think, one of our dorm mates' friends whom she invited over. Why though? And how though? I think consistency is the key word here. I would love to share some videos and photos of me doing yoga in our dorm, in that little tiny space, just to paint the whole picture. Like, it was, I think, almost weird to keep up with that routine in that very small place. I'm definitely going to share more on Instagram about it because there are some very funny and fun clips that I would love to laugh about it together. But let me try to paint the picture a bit more clear. In our first year, we lived together. As I said, we had a bigger room, and I was either practicing yoga in this quite spacious space in the middle of all the bunk beds, but if not, I was practicing it in front of the bathroom between our wardrobes and kitchen counter. In both cases, my dorm mates had to jump over or go around me to reach the bathroom or their beds or to use the kitchen or their wardrobes. The other 2 years were even more adventurous because this time there was literally no space where I could do yoga apart from this space between 2 bunk beds. 2 of my friends who had the bottom bunks had to jump over the mat right into their beds. And the other friend who had the top bunk had to climb down to my mat. And sometimes there was this funny occasion of me having her food right in front of my face in these weird yoga poses. I don't know how we did it, but a couple of times we managed to move the table so that one of my dorm mates could join me in my practice because she was interested in it. There was a point where we used to listen to the interviews of this yoga teacher with another of my dorm mates. Like, she was truly interested in learning about yoga philosophy. When I used to meditate each night, I used to put on my headphones just to isolate myself a bit more from what was happening around me in that room. But in time, that dorm mate of mine, who was interested in the interviews of my yoga teacher, also got interested in listening to meditation music that I was listening to while I was meditating. Her favorite definitely was the Indian flute, and we used to put that on even when we just chill or study in our beds. This was a true influence of consistency. Consistency creates a vortex around it. It invites and inspires people to join the vortex. As we become more consistent in our actions, in our intentions, in our heart-driven desires, not ego-driven desires, in our dreams, as we get consistent in all these things, we create a vortex around ourselves. That vortex becomes visible from the outside, and people get curious about it. What is this thing you're doing? What creates this vortex? What keeps you going? What motivates you? What is that journey like? Consistency is the absence of contradictions. If we show up every day consistently to whatever the thing we are doing, it creates certainty in our actions and our journey toward our goals and aspirations. It creates a path without any contradictions because we are not blowing hot and cold. It invites companies to join you on this journey who have similar aspirations and dreams. In philosophy and ethics, truth is considered as something logically consistent. Logical consistency means the absence of contradictions. If there is nothing contradicts the existence of a fact, a situation, a concept, then it is most probably the truth until it faces a contradiction. We are creating our truths by being consistent. Our truths enhance as we revisit them and complement them every single time. I was revisiting the practices that were keeping my sanity bubble up and running every day. I was doing yoga every day. I was eating the same breakfast every day because that was, for me, the best option without any cooking facilities. I was meditating every night to let go of the day behind me and to refresh my bubble. Everything around me was changing drastically. Just think about it. You graduate from high school, you move to a dormitory and start uni. Even the fact that every course was in a different classroom was a big change. Even that required a lot of flexibility in my mind. That is why I think it became crucial for me to be more consistent in my routines. They were rooting me down in a time when everything was foreign and everything was changing every day at the speed of light. Now that I remember, the other practice that I embodied during those years was bullet journaling. I had my first ever bullet journal, well, it was more like a planner, a couple of months after I entered uni. The term started in October and I bought my planner in January to start the year with. I started to write everything down and plan everything. My classes, their workload, the social events that I was going to take part in, the dance practices and a habit tracker for my yoga, breathing and meditation practices. To this day, it has been 7 years and I'm still journaling. I'm buying a new bullet journal every year and creating it from zero. My planner habit also created a vortex around it. In 3 years we lived together with my dorm mates. Every year, the number of people who ordered a planner was increasing. We were exchanging ideas, they were asking me for opinions, and I was getting more clear in my intentions behind journaling as I told more about it to them. One last vortex that I want to mention to you is my water intake. I drink a lot of water, like during summers it can go up to 4 liters a day. And I pay attention to it as well. As you can imagine by now, of course, we didn't have any bedside tables in our dorm. So I had to keep my bottle literally next to my pillow. I used to have a glass 1.5 liter water bottle just for me to use it in the dorm. And to this day, I have it, one at home and one at the summer house. It has been an essential item for me for quite a long time now. During those years, I was out all day from one class to another, and at the end of the day, a social gathering or something. So I started to look for a water bottle that, first of all, had to be lightweight, and secondly, it couldn't be plastic. Eventually, I found one, and I started using it every day, of course. It was a bit weird looking, to be honest. At some point, my dad saw it one day and told me that it looked like a bladder. If not, it was definitely like an IV bag, he said. But at the end of the day, it was serving the purpose. It was lightweight and foldable, made of environmentally friendly material, didn't take up much space, and my water didn't get in contact with plastic. Consistently, I was using this water bottle for my whole uni years, and this consistency created an influence around it. At least 2 times, I remember, we made bulk orders of these water bottles with my dorm mates. At some point, it was so funny because when we used to go out with all of us together, everyone was drinking from this IV bag looking bottle in many different colors. Again, this was consistency. Let's slowly end our conversation today. I want to leave you with a visualization of this concept of consistency. I said consistency creates a vortex around it. Consistency in our actions, in our intentions, in our goals, but also in our fears, in our insecurities, in our shortcomings. With everything we do and don't do consistently, we create a flow, a continuous self-nourishing flow. We form our future with this flow. We are heading towards the crossroads where we meet our other companies who have similar flows and vortexes. When the phrase consistency creates a vortex around it came to me a couple of months ago, I lived with it. And now that I spend time thinking about it and processing it and taming it to my understanding, it created an image within me. So I want to share it with you. Imagine yourself as a lighthouse. Every day you consistently emit a beam of light with your values, your actions, your intentions, habits, routines, and conditionings. This unwavering consistency of light creates a powerful vortex that can be seen from afar. What's the purpose of a lighthouse? To guide the ones who lost at sea, no? No. I think it's more to be a light for them, to not to get lost in the first place. Just like those people at sea looking for a beam of light coming from the lighthouse's unwavering light, people around you will be drawn to your unwavering focus. It is inspirational to see people illuminating with their heart-driven lights. It is enchanting to witness this vortex of light. It is inviting to be a part of it. Let's ask ourselves, what kind of light am I shining? What kind of a consistency vortex I'm creating? Am I embodying the consistency that inspires others? I invite all of us to choose our practices, our routines, our values, the things we consistently do and don't do with intention. Because in the end, it's your consistency that will create the most impactful vortex around you. As our conversation for today fades away, may you find your echoes of it that resonate within you. Thanks for listening today. This is Inner Dialogues with Ecem, a place where you discover your inner you, a place where you belong. Take care.